Let's bring in Peter King, who joins us. Before I talk football, I know you knew Grant Wahl, the great soccer writer, and also got an opportunity to spend time talking to his wife. Would you like to share some of that conversation?
Yeah, sure, Dan. Thank you. Celine Gounder, who is now Grant's widow, I think is, when she was discussing with me Grant's death, I think it was a cross between trying to be clinical and also talking about someone who she obviously loved dearly. And it was hard at times for her. I did an interview with her that I posted as a podcast yesterday. But the one thing that really stood out to me is that she feels so incredibly grateful for everyone who has basically sung the praises of Grant Wahl as the greatest soccer writer and the most influential sports media person in the United States about this growing sport. And Dan, back in 2010, when we both worked for Sports Illustrated, I went to cover the World Cup in South Africa. And Grant was basically my entree into this world of soccer. He took me everywhere. He introduced me to everybody. He said, "Hey, go talk to Bob Bradley, the coach. He's a big Parcells guy. You'll have something in common. He's a New Jersey guy." And so it was all that kind of stuff. And, some people might say, well, geez, Grant's giving you time with people who he cultivated and who he wanted to be able to work with. And I always thought that the reason he did that is not only for total unselfishness and class, but because he wanted to see the game grow in the United States. And so that's why he's introducing me to everybody. He wants me to write about it to a non-soccer crowd, so he just was an unselfish guy who had so many people around the country who can say right now that he was a huge influence in their lives. And I think that's what Celine right now really appreciates about him.
Yes, I think that people might know the name Grant Wahl because he did the profile on LeBron James when LeBron was still in high school,
yeah.
Did the cover story, and the first one to really say, America, here's the future in LeBron James. But he really was known for being a soccer writer and helped grow the sport immensely. And I hope there's some, posthumous honor for him that his wife can share in, his widow can share in, that's soccer related.
I do too. And I think U.S. soccer, hey, look, you heard Becky Sauerbrunn, Abby Wambach, Tyler Adams from this year's team really get very, very emotional talking about Grant. And so I'm sure that U.S. soccer is going to do something. They should do something. I hope a lot of people do something because his is a memory that we all should cherish.
We're talking to Peter King, Football Morning in America columnist, comes out every Monday morning and a contributor to Football Night in America. NFL owners meetings, the review on roughing the passer. If I'm correct with the numbers, that they haven't called it as often based off last year, but they've been inconsistent in how they're calling it. Is that a fair way to look at this topic?
I think it's fair. I think the issue is that you basically, because roughing the passer, Dan, if you think about it, is almost exclusively called by the referee. There's two of the seven game officials who call the game from the backfield. One is the umpire, and he's mostly watching the offensive line. And the other is the referee, and he is charged on that specific play with watching, if it's a pass play, watching the hits on the quarterback. And you have 17 people, and you have 17, even though the NFL tries so hard to make it an absolute equal standard, it's impossible. They're human beings. So you have one guy who's going to say, well, that looked like the quarterback was flung to the ground, and I'm going to call it. And another referee would say, hey, he's just throwing the guy to the ground. His momentum carried him. He didn't do that maliciously. And so that's the issue right now. And look, I'm all for the NFL trying to make the game as well officiated as possible. And Dan, what's the old cliche about, you're never going to be perfect, but if you seek perfection, you'll be the best that you can be. That's fine. But for everybody to want to have pass interference and roughing the passer called the same by 17 crews, it's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen.
Are you against replay review for roughing the passer?
I mean, I'm sort of, Dan, I think replay ought to be used on any play that a coach wants to challenge. And, that's a Belichickism too. But the reason that I feel that way is that if you only have a certain amount of challenges in a game, you're going to be judicious with them as a coach. So it's not going to be, oh my God, there's going to be so many more stoppages. Coaches are going to have to save a challenge or two for late in the game. So they're not going to throw a flag on something that happens with 10 minutes left in the first quarter, most likely. So all I'm saying is I'm in favor of being able to challenge anything. But I mean, I think there are a lot more important things that can be challenged, honestly, than hits on quarterbacks. It's something that is not just going to be done in a uniform way.
Yeah, I worry that if we start to go a little bit closer to college, you have automatic ejections here. Those are review. They do look at those, but still, you're talking about automatic ejections. I don't know if the NFL gets to that point.
I don't think so. I can't see it. I can't see, Micah Parsons 5 minutes into a playoff game driving Jalen Hurts into the ground and and Sean Hockley saying ejection.
Yeah.
It's too, these games, even regular season games, they're too important, I think, to make. Now, look, it's one thing if Micah Parsons rears back and slugs Jalen Hurts in the jaw with a punch, he should be ejected, but not for a football play that maybe is over the line.
The NFL talked about the lowest average score margin for a season. There's closer games. This is the lowest average score margin for a season since 1932, but scoring is down. How concerning do you think this is for the NFL and the competition committee?
I think it's a little bit too early to say we need to make such and such a rules change about this. And I know the NFL is really, really into scoring, time of game, all those things. But look, I think the NFL will say we don't want the scoring to go down that much. But again, this is 1 year. It's 14 weeks. And the one thing, Dan, that I think that I would say to sort of counter that the reason why I don't really think it's that big a deal, I think it's just, sort of the vagaries of a season. You can't point to something and say, that's the reason why scoring is down a little bit, not a lot. And I would just look at some of the ratings that the NFL has gotten this year. Fans are not saying, oh boy, I'll tell you what, scoring's down 3 points a game, I'm not watching. They're not saying that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you want to be cognizant of this, and you want to see if there are things that you can do to make sure that this doesn't become, 6 points a game, 8 points a game, 10 points a game. I get it. But I think it's a little bit early to be very reactionary about that.
If we had a friendly bet, is Daniel Snyder still owning the Commanders next year?
My friendly bet would say no, but I have no inside information on that, Dan. I can't believe that the league will continue to kowtow to Snyder and to allow, and look, you can say whatever you want about what's fair, what's unfair, but if I'm one of the 32 owners in the league and I read testimony before the Congress of the United States that Bruce Allen, who he can be Daniel Snyder's dread enemy right now, which he is, but there was a time when they were the closest, president and CEO, owner and CEO, president, whatever title Allen had. They were as close as any two people in the league. And so for Bruce Allen to say that even Dan Snyder hinted at, I'm going to have Roger Goodell tailed so we can find out some dirt on him.
Yeah.
How do you have somebody like that in your league? How do you do that? And how does Roger Goodell continually just poo-poo this like it's no big deal? It's just, I just think the NFL has given Snyder way too long a leash.
But it'd be precedent. And the commissioner never wants this to get to a vote. He probably would say to Daniel Snyder, look, I don't want this to get to a vote. You need to sell the team. Robert Sarver with the Phoenix Suns. Let's not put this to a vote. Let's just, you make a smart decision, quote unquote, sell the team, make your money, and then move on from here. Let's not make this worse. And this is why the commissioner makes $60 million a year. He's got to represent all of these owners, including the one that they may want out, but he still has to represent him as well.
I get it, Dan. I really get it. I think the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues right now, is that there's so many new owners and people who've come in the last 10 years who basically, like the Denver Broncos owners now, the Walton Penner people, they're just sitting back and trying to figure out what this league is and trying to figure out the business of football and all that. And I get that. And that's important. You don't want to be knee-jerk in this. But at some point, you have to say, we just don't want to be in business with this guy anymore. And Dan, the other thing is, the NFL has spent so much time and energy dealing with a rogue owner. It reminds me in a little bit of a different way of Al Davis, because even though Daniel Snyder is not one of these guys who in a football sense is at war with the NFL. It's kind of in a business sense he is. Okay. And I don't even want to say at war. He has run a once proud franchise into the ground over the last quarter century. There's no arguing it. And I think it's long past time for somebody to get to him and to say, listen, for the good of your family, for the good of the game, for the good of the fans of Metro Washington, you've got to sell this team.
Pete, good to talk to you as always. Thanks for your thoughts on Grant Wahl, and safe travels.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Take care.
Peter King, Football Morning in America, and contributor to Football Night in America.